For what purpose does Mr. Jordan seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
The Democrats have a bill that says to political jurisdictions, if you change your law, if you do it the way we want you, we'll give you money. And our colleague from North Carolina comes with an amendment and says, if you engage in certain behavior, we're not going to give you that money. It is entirely relevant. The chairman has twice now used the term irrelevant. This is as relevant as it gets. Last week, the Democrats started off the week with one of our colleagues from Detroit saying no more policing. We just heard the gentleman from Rhode Island say the Democrats haven't talked about defunding the police.
No, that's not what I said.
One of their members said last week,
we haven't talked
no
about
more policing. No more policing. And let me just, the Democrat-run cities, New York City cut $1 billion from its police department's budget and saw a 97% increase in shootings. Los Angeles cut $170 million from its budget, saw an 11.6% increase in homicides. Austin, Texas, $150 million cut, 50% spike in homicides. Portland, Oregon, a $12 million cut, eliminated 3 police units. Shootings went up 173%, murders up 25%. I would bet the people, the residents of those communities think this amendment is relevant, for goodness sake. Democrats started the week last week saying, get rid of police. They ended the week with one of our colleagues, Democrat colleagues, being admonished by a judge for the ridiculous things that they said. And somehow the gentleman from North Carolina's amendment's not relevant? Are you kidding me? This is as relevant as it gets, as timely as it gets. And I hope we could actually agree on something and adopt the gentleman's amendment. With that, I yield back my time.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make it quite clear that this amendment is completely irrelevant. I served as a law enforcement officer for 27 years. It is a tough job, and good police officers deserve your support. You know, it's interesting to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle support the police when it is politically convenient to do so. Law enforcement officers risk their lives every day. They deserve better. And the American people deserve. I have the floor, Mr. Jordan.
Lady has
What?
the floor.
Did I strike a nerve? Law enforcement officers deserve better than to be utilized as pawns. And you and your colleagues are ashamed of yourself.
The gentlelady will suspend and the clock will be stopped. I want to admonish members. They must not interrupt someone who has the time.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
simply
question?
can't shout out. If you think that someone is saying
I agree.
Mr. Jordan, you don't know what in the heck you're talking about. You know nothing about what law enforcement officers
I know about my motive.
And you're using them as pawns because it serves your ridiculous political purpose.
Val, everyone must suspend. I am making the point. No one may shout out when someone else has the time. Not Mr. Gomert.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Not Mr. Jordan. Nobody.
Not Mr. Cicilline.
Not Miss.
Not Miss Demings.
He didn't do that. But nobody.
Not Mr. Jordan.
Not Miss.
Nobody.
Cicilline. Okay, no, but I agree with that. But
then how do we?
Everybody.
I have a question.
I will simply. There is no question. Nobody may shout out.
When you give a speech, Mr. Chairman, about motives and questioning motives, and then our motives are questioned, how do we address that?
The rules allow a request for words.
I have
point of
watched
inquiry.
them live and die, and you know nothing about that. And to utilize them as political
Mr. Chairman,
pawns,
I have a point of inquiry.
off.
People
Chairman, I
will
have a
address
point of
comments
inquiry.
to the chair.
Mr. Chairman.
The rules do not permit shouting out when someone else has the time. The only thing you may do when someone else has the time is you may raise a point of order if you think it proper, and the chair will then rule on the
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
So you gave us a lecture on people questioning our motives. When someone questions our motives, how do we address it when they're in the act of questioning our motives?
That is not a point of order.
Yes, it is.
That is not a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue, please?
That is not a point of order. Ms. Demings has the time, and the clock will resume. Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are on the side of law enforcement now. Because I don't know where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been over the last 4 years, including on January 6th, when police officers who protect us every day were fighting for their lives because of the big lie that was told, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were silent. As one person after another person took the microphone and said, go down there and engage in combat, fight like hell. They used the bicycle racks as deadly missiles against the law enforcement officers that you all say you care about so much. And thank you, Mr. Cicilline, because you're absolutely right. The only person who voted to support local governments and pass legislation to support local governments that includes law enforcement were the Democratic members on this side of the aisle. But now today, you support law enforcement. Well, I'm delighted to know that. But don't support them when it's politically convenient for you to do so. Support them when they're under attack by people fighting them and spraying them and knocking them to the ground and beating them with poles, with carrying the American flags and pipes.
Unbelievable.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does Mr. Roy seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Appreciate the chairman. I would note that the gentlelady references January 6th. Speaking for myself and at least a few others in this room on this committee, I was one of those members that voted not to object, that took the floor acknowledging some of the issues that occurred on January 6th. And everybody in this room, regardless of how they voted on January 6th, understands exactly what Capitol Police did in standing up and defending this institution. And in fact, just today, the Republican Conference presented certificates and awards and commendation to recognize law enforcement that stood on the floor of the Capitol to defend this body. I did not serve in law enforcement, but I was the first Assistant Attorney General of Texas and had about 170 law enforcement reporting to him. I was a former federal prosecutor and worked with law enforcement. My grandfather was the chief of police of a small Texas town. My great-great-grandfather was a Texas Ranger in Texas. I come from a family that is heavily devoted to law enforcement and the rule of law. I understand, and I've heard the arguments that FOP supports this legislation. That's fine. The reason that we're rising and the reason that the gentleman from North Carolina's amendment matters is because what we're talking about nationwide, in response, by the way, to that nobody's cutting anything, that's just not true, is that we are seeing dramatic cuts and attacks on law enforcement. It's happening in real time. Austin, Texas, run by Democrats, slashed the police department, and they are absolutely demoralized. They are crushed. Go talk to the law enforcement. They are fleeing the city. And now the city is overrun by homeless encampments, and it is dangerous, and people don't go downtown, our beautiful city in Austin, Texas, because of a radical leftist city council. And that radical leftist city council takes funding from this body. All of the funding everybody talked about, ooh, you voted against all of that great local government funding. That because you spent $6 trillion in the last year, $6 trillion. We're talking about grants with money we don't even have. We're talking about, and we're arguing about grant money we literally don't have, while we mortgage our children's future and we pretend we're not doing it. $30 trillion of debt. $6 trillion in a year. It cost us $4 trillion in today's dollars to win World War II from beginning to end. And this Democratic Congress blew through $6 trillion in a year doing nothing. Nothing to make this country better or stronger. It is an absolute abomination. And then to listen to members of this body say, and I quote, I hope we get a verdict that says guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away. We've got to stay on the street. We get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure they know that we mean business. How irresponsible can a member of Congress be than to say that and then to have the judge in the case that the whole nation is watching say that that might throw the case out on appeal? That is what we're talking about. We are talking about the quote by another member of this body. It wasn't an accident. Policing in our country is inherently and intentionally racist. I am done with those who condone government-funded murder. Government-funded murder, no more policing, quote, no more policing, incarceration, and militarization. It can't be reformed. To say this is irrelevant, it is the central issue of our day right now to make sure this country is safe. And when we're talking about federal grant money being doled out, and by the way, what does the bill start with? Quote, to provide grants to states that do not suspend, revoke, or refuse. That's what we do. We throw out money, and then we demand action. And all my friend from North Carolina is doing is saying, don't defund the cops. I yield to the ranking member.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Republicans have been consistent. The gentlelady from Florida said Republicans care about law enforcement today. We've cared about law enforcement all the time. It's been the Democrats. We condemned the violence on January 6th, and we condemned it last summer. It'd have been nice if our colleagues on the other side had done the same. All last summer, when police were being pelted with frozen water bottles, bricks, and beat up, where were they? They were raising bail money to bail out the rioters and looters who were doing those very actions to the police. And today we get a lecture about how we haven't been consistent? You got to be kidding me. We've been consistent. You guys haven't, and you know it. That's why you're all so fired up. The gentleman's amendment is right on target, and I hope we adopt it. I yield back.
I yield.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Let me first of all thank Ms. Scanlon for a very thoughtful bill.
Mr. Rickleman, can I start with you? In 2018, the day after the Supreme Court ruled that California couldn't force pro-life pregnancy centers, resource centers, to advertise on behalf of abortion clinics, you wrote an interesting op-ed in the Huffington Post. I have it right here. You said in this op-ed that pregnancy resource centers are nothing but faux clinics, that's your word, that pose as real medical facilities. Do you remember writing this?
I don't remember that particular article, Senator, but I take your word for it.
You don't, it was 2018, you don't remember writing it?
Just not that particular article, but I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have about it.
Well, let me just ask what you meant by faux clinics. Do you stand by that pregnancy resource centers are faux clinics that pose as medical facilities? Faux means fake, of course, so you're saying that they're fake clinics?
Senator, I believe the case that you're referring to is the NIFLA versus Becerra case, and I was involved in that case as an advocate on behalf of amici, and the case concerned a California law that was a consumer protection law that was enacted after some women reported that they felt misled about the types of services that were available at the centers, and that's all that I was referring to there.
Well, no, I'm asking about your comments that pregnancy resource centers are faux clinics. We have had representatives from pregnancy resource centers here before this committee testifying under oath who testified that at their centers they employ trained, licensed medical professionals. So is your testimony here that these folks are lying under oath, that that's not the case, that these centers are all fake?
Absolutely not, Senator. Again, I was just referring to the amicus brief that I'd written as an advocate in that case, which shared stories of women from California who had gone to some pregnancy centers without understanding that they didn't provide any medical services at that particular center.
Well, how about this? Is an ultrasound a legitimate medical procedure in your view?
Of course, Senator.
Okay. So countless pregnancy resource centers provide ultrasounds. Those are medical procedures. Ultrasounds allow fetal abnormalities to be diagnosed and treated early on. So surely those aren't faux clinics. In another article, you said that these clinics cause women to suffer concrete harms to their health. That's just confusing to me. I mean, these clinics, and there are thousands of them across the country, including in my home state of Missouri, provide free pregnancy tests, free ultrasounds, free prenatal care, free adoption care, free diapers, free clothes, free car seats. Many of them even provide free job training. And yet you're saying that they're faux clinics.
Senator, I absolutely support all parents having the resources they need. In that article, I was merely speaking as an advocate about the particular law that had just been evaluated by the Supreme Court, which was a consumer protection law in response to some women who had felt misled by some centers.
You were using the Supreme Court's decision as an opportunity to tarnish and to go after pregnancy resource centers, which is frankly something we've seen from our friends here on the left who would like to eliminate these pregnancy resource centers and shut them down all across the country. They're very open about that. I'm just trying to figure out, is that your view too? Would you like to see these pregnancy resource centers that provide this free medical care to women shut down across the country so that free medical care for women is no longer available?
Senator, once again, I was just speaking about one particular law in California that was enacted as a consumer protection law just to make sure that all women could have whatever information they needed to make the best decisions for themselves. That's all that I was speaking about.
Let me ask you about the Supreme Court's decision in the 2007 case, Gonzalez versus Carhart. You're familiar with that case, I assume.
Yes, I know that case.
Let me just read briefly from the case. Dr. Haskell went in with forceps and grabbed the baby's legs and pulled them down into the birth canal. Then he delivered the baby's body and arms, everything but the head. Then the doctor stuck the scissors into the back of his head and the baby's arms jerked out. The doctor opened up the scissors, stuck a high-powered suction tube into the opening and sucked the baby's brains out. That's partial birth abortion. Congress banned this procedure by bipartisan majority in 2003. Do you think Congress made the right call there?
Senator, what I know is that the Supreme Court upheld that act, I believe about 15 years ago, and it's been settled law in the country for all of that time. And of course, I will faithfully follow it if I were so fortunate as to become a judge.
Well, I'm asking because in 2019, news outlet in Oklahoma quoted you saying you oppose any attempt to regulate abortion procedures. The article says that you opposed an Oklahoma state law that, quote, bans dismemberment abortions. And it quotes a public statement you released saying, we cannot overstate the harm this decision will have on women in Oklahoma. Politicians should never take medical options off the table for pregnant patients. So you're against bans on partial birth abortion.
No, Senator. The law has been settled there for 15 years. And just to be clear, all of the work that I did as an advocate was within the confines of Supreme Court precedent, which allowed states to impose limits on abortion, but also recognized that women should be able to make their own personal medical decisions.
Well, my time has expired. I know there are other senators who want to ask questions, so I will return the floor to the chairman. I just want to say in conclusion, Ms. Rickleman, that I have to say that your characterization of pregnancy centers, your opposition to, frankly, radical pro-abortion laws, I think are very, very troubling. And it gives me grave concern about your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh, em nghe tình yêu thức dậy êm đềm, nhớ từng nụ cười ánh mắt, nhớ lời ngọt ngào âu yếm, tóc em thơm giấc ngủ dịu. Biết giờ này anh có nhớ em không? Có nghe tình yêu thức dậy trong lòng? Đêm từng màu thời gian đến, bóng hình người mình yêu mến, ôi nhớ gì hơn nhớ người yêu. Rất chân thành ước nguyện trọn đời yêu anh, chớ đừng giận hờn em nhé. Anh ơi đừng bao giờ nói chia lìa, tội nghiệp em lắm, đã thương nhau chớ phụ tình nhau. Thức trọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh, sương rơi lạnh câm cảnh vật im lìm. Ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách, hai đứa mình thức trắng đêm nay. Anh ơi, lòng em thì rất chân thành, ước nguyện trọn đời yêu anh, chớ đừng giận hờn em nhé. Anh ơi, đừng bao giờ nói chia lìa, sẽ làm tội nghiệp em lắm, đã thương nhau chớ phụ tình nhau. Thức trọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh, sương rơi lạnh câm cảnh vật im lìm. Ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách, hai đứa mình thức trắng đêm nay. Ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách, hai đứa mình thức trắng